2, 3, 4.
For me, well, one, I was when it came to competitions, I was always the guy in my crew that didn't want to compete. I just wanted to dance in the circles. I was always that guy. People like Charles, my brother Charles especially, were always like, "Come on, man, we got to battle tonight. We got to go against those guys. We got to, you know, stat elements in the competition. We have to go against them so we can meet in the final." Then we did, you know, and what did they call themselves? Flying tortillas, you know, like they're in the competition. We got to go head to head with them, man. And like that wasn't what I wanted to do at the time. You know, I just wanted to dance in the circles and to do these things where I wouldn't be judged. I would just be free. Because in the circles, anything goes. You can say, okay, well, yeah, that guy's not a b-boy, but it's a circle, so who cares? Anybody can go in the circle and do anything. You can't regulate the circle. You just can't. It's free by default, you know? And that unfortunately leads to interesting things in clubs where the drunk chicks get in there and you can't make them stop because they're drunk and it's the circle and anything goes. So sometimes it sucks. But for me, that was my home. That was where I would experiment with all these crazy thoughts that I had, these ideas that I had. But being kind of pressured to compete and being in a crew full of ambitious b-boys that had these new ideas, especially when it came to air flares, I knew that there was some kind of a responsibility too. Like these had to be shared on a larger platform. And the only platform available to us in the 90s was the competitions, the growing competitions where a few months later a VHS comes out of freestyle session or Radiotron, and then maybe the whole world gets it. So we knew, like, we have these interesting things and we want to be known for helping to innovate these interesting moves. The only way that's going to be seen is the competitions and the videos that are made. It's not going to be in the circles. But of course we did both. We always did both. So I had to put these ideas on the stage, you know, the competition stage, because I was kind of forced to by my crew, by loyalty to my friends, and because I knew they'd be seen. I knew they'd be seen and they'd be talked about, you know, and that interested me because I was really curious to see what people would think, how people would respond to these things, you know. For me, it was about personality too. I always had a lot of hair, and it had to be used, you know. When I was dancing, it had to be part of the total picture of creative expression, you know, and it made me memorable at least, you know. And that's what you want. You want to be remembered. You want to be identifiable, and you want to be memorable as a b-boy. Otherwise, you know, you can really get lost in the flood of history because there are so many of us, you know. Especially now, it's much harder to stand out now. I really sympathize with the b-boys and b-girls now. It's so much harder to get a name, you know, than it was when I was young. But that was how I wanted to be identified. I wanted to be that unorthodox guy that does these new weird things. Not everybody likes them, but you can't deny that those things are mine. That's me dancing. That's me doing them. Even if I do a move somebody else does, it doesn't look like somebody else doing it. If you see just my silhouette, just my shadow, you know it's me. For me, that was the idea. And so all of these ideas that I had about choreography before I was a choreographer, they came out in that way. They came out in the circle that way, for those reasons. What's the word? It's a paradox. Very much a paradox. It's like both true and false at the same time, you know? Because it is easier in that way, in that very technological way to get your stuff out there. If you are one of these few people that are very different from everybody else. And like here in Holland, there's Menno, for example. There are many more, but Menno's one of the first people that comes to my mind, that comes to most people's minds. And he's a good guy, you know, and he's very different. There are many more. You go to any country, you have like a few guys that really stand out. And in YouTube and the accessibility of the internet and internet videos really helps in that way. But it's hard because, you know, put aside the people that stand out for a minute and think about everybody else. Because the people that stand out is not even 1% of the b-boy population. It's a fraction of 1%, maybe a tenth of a tenth of 1%. Think about those other 99.9% of b-boys and b-girls out there that are trying to make a name for themselves, really, really want what me or Menno or Storm or any of these guys who are a little bit more known have achieved. And they're the 99%, so to speak, you know, and they're trying to get the name out there, they're trying to be successful, they don't want to be stuck in a regular job right now, they want to travel, they want to work, they want to compete, they want to do all these things and be successful as b-boys or b-girls. Think about how hard that is when everybody does everything, because everybody has access to the internet, and everybody can watch the same videos, and everybody can learn the same moves by watching in their living rooms, in their garage, or wherever they practice. They can just get on the phone, look at a video, and then, okay, that's how you do it, and then get down and do it right now. And we didn't have that option. It was not an option when we were young, you know. But if you think about that on a much more expanded scale, like, you know, time is literally millions. People looking on their phones, looking at a video, and then copying it right now in real time, in practice, and then going back to their phones and seeing if they did it right, or then looking at another video. Think about that times millions. And you see how hard it is for regular people. It's the same in the economy, you know? Like, we know who the 1% people are, you know, because they're famous and they've already made it. But what about the 99% that are trying to make it, that are just trying to survive, you know? They have a very hard time just doing that. And it's the same in the b-boy world. And it's because technology has leveled the playing field. It's the double-edged sword. You have some people that would not be famous if not for the internet, because they would not be successful in battles. Like people that are kind of like me when I was younger. They're really unorthodox. They want to try these odd things that are really unique and really belong to them and only them. Nobody else can do them. But if they go to a battle, they lose in the first round because they don't have enough, you name it, enough foundation or enough musicality, or even if they do have enough musicality, they're too unorthodox. They don't do a 6-step or something. You know, they don't follow one of the rules or some of the rules, so they get eliminated right away. You don't get to see what they can do. So then the battle becomes not the best place for them. The internet becomes the best place for them to share what they have to offer. So you see some of these things that are spread on Facebook by, you know, Strife TV or you name it, any of the groups who share videos of interesting b-boys. And some of these guys would be nobody if not for the internet, you know. So it's a double-edged sword, but I still insist that it is harder today because if nothing else, if you disregard everything else I said, there are millions of us now. How do you stand out among millions? And everybody is just as good as you are. Everybody has access to the same teachers, even if it's through the internet, as you do. You know, there's no longer the one-on-one relationships. I mean, there are, but not as much, you know. It's just, I have to insist it is much harder now. Oh, man. I think it was less luck and more fate that we all met up and became the family that we are, because we're from all over California. We're not just from LA, you know. In the beginning, we had two separate crews, Floor Control, my group, and Soul Swift, Barmex and Bob's group. And we actually wanted to call them out because we were ambitious and young, and we just wanted to have battle with other groups to get our own name out there. We were little kids, you know. I was 18, 19, you know. And I just wanted to get my own name out there and get my crew's name out there, and, you know, just get some of that, you know, get our celebrity status. And they heard that we wanted to call us out, so they called me. Barmac called me, which is awkward, you know, like, I want to battle you, why are you calling me, you know? But they invited us to practice because they saw what we were doing and it was interesting, and we saw what they were doing and it was interesting, and we ended up becoming the best of friends. Other people saw what we had and were attracted to that. Maybe they weren't finding it in their own individual crews, so they would, you know, and they would have these fights in their crews, and they would leave those groups and then join our group, and then we had this really interesting family of people from very different walks of life, different backgrounds, different cities. But what we had in common was that we loved being powerful, and we loved being creative and innovative and different, you know. we had some access. We did have the same VHS videos everybody else had. We had a few more too. We got lucky. We got some footage of Europe back then when hardly anybody had footage of Europe, and that's where we saw the air flare or the air track. We thought it was called an air track at the time. Nobody was using the word air flare at that time, or air twist. We also heard that one. But when we saw that, and we were like, that's the future. Nobody's doing that. Nobody's doing that. There are 2 people, 3 people on this video doing that, but they stop. They don't take it very far. They just do a twist and they stop. What if you did that to a windmill? What if you did that to a halo? What if you did that to a flare? What if you did that to a 90? What if you did 2 of them? And all these things started to overwhelm us. The possibilities were overwhelming us, and we thought of every single variation that might be possible at that time. There were variations we weren't able to think of yet because we didn't know things were possible yet. Like one-arm air flares continuous. Like that was not even nowhere near the realm of possibility in the 90s, in the early 90s, mid-90s when we were doing this stuff. So we thought, let's jump on that and let's master that before everybody else does, because everybody else is going to, inevitably. And so me and Bobak and Ivan, we would practice together all the time, and we would try to compete to see who was going to get air track as opposed to air flare. We made a distinction between those 2 moves. An air track is just like a 90, it spins on one axis, or a head spin, or a backspin, it spins on one axis. Maybe the axis is changed, so it's that. But it's just one axis. It just, you catch in the same place, An air flare, you travel a little bit, you rotate like a windmill. A windmill doesn't spin on one axis, it spins on 2 axes at the same time, vertical and horizontal at the same time. So we thought of an air flare as being more like a windmill and 2 axes. So we had this distinction, and we would do both, I would do halo, air track halo, and I was the first to do that as far as I know, and I have old video of it. And then I would do halo, air flare halo. And for me, that was 2 different combos. But now that would just be, a halo to a spin in the air to a halo, or just an air flare now. But for me, they were 2 different things. And we would do these things. But me and Ivan and Bobak would compete to see who would get air track to windmill first. Ivan could do it, but he would always smack his feet on the floor. And then I beat him to it. And he looked at me like, it was pretty funny. But then he came back and did air flare to windmill. He changed the technique, and it was much cleaner than what I had done. So I was like, okay, you win this round. But then we said, okay, well, we're gonna keep doing this. It was a competitive thing amongst ourselves and amongst our friend Ivan and other friends, Iron Monkey, who had briefly been in our crew, and then we had issues, and he left and joined a few other crews before he ended up in Renegades. But he was friendly competition there too, and many more, But that spirit of competition amongst ourselves and amongst our friends and amongst future opponents, and against history, trying to beat history to the punch with the air flare and the air track was our motivation. And so we did everything we could think of. I mean, Mega Man did the first air flare to halo, flare, air flare, halo. Charles did the first flare, air flare, flare. Ivan had done air flare, flare before Charles, but nobody had done that combo, flare, air flare, flare, until Charles did it. And then Pablo came along, and Pablo was Charles' teacher of all things power moves, but Charles got air flare first, but Charles taught his teacher how to air flare. And then in one day, in a matter of minutes, Pablo got every combo you could think of with an air flare, because he was so talented. So he not only did he get air flare windmill, he got air flare flare multiple times. He got air flare headspin, air flare 90, and 2 air flares, and then 3 air flares before anybody on earth did it. Because we had to. It was just like we had to do this. We just knew in our DNA that this had to happen now, and it was going to be the future. So we did all these things. Man, I mean, I can go on. I did the first off of the I don't know if you call it inside or outside arm, but the first arm that comes down, I would do the one-arm air flare off of that one arm, off that first arm, I mean, and that was 1996, and I did it at Radiotron, and silence. Nobody cared, nobody knew what it was, so they didn't care to cheer for it, But this one guy named Sway from Renegades, most people don't know anymore because he disappeared, but he was one of the 3. It was Jazzy J, Wicket, and Sway. They were the trio that were badass in Renegade. Sway came up to me and was like, "You just did a one-arm air track." I was like, "Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you saw that." And nobody else knew what it was, except my crew and this guy, you know. And now it's normal. Everybody and their mom does a one-arm air strike, you know. But in 1996, it was not in the collective consciousness. It was not considered part of the realm of possibility or part of the general vocabulary of b-boys. So they weren't ready to even acknowledge what it was or even appreciate it, you know. No matter what else I do with my life, I'm a b-boy first.